All right, hello everybody. We're here with Dr. Roberts. She started her career as a teacher and director of early childhood services. She also worked as a relief teacher and then transitioned to mentoring roles, tutoring, supervising pre-service teachers at Murdoch, Curtin, and Edith Cowan universities. So she then completed her doctorate and coordinated and taught early childhood primary units. Her doctoral research explored reflection through e-portfolios and blended learning for competency development and registration. As a lecturer and later senior lecturer at ECU, she focused on science in early childhood, STEM inquiry skills, and reflective practices. Her current research includes workforce advocacy, the impact of NAPLAN on children's well-being, and involvement in the Center of Excellence for Digital Child, an ARC-funded project. So we're just going to ask her a few questions today.
Hi, Dr. Roberts. Thank you for joining us.
Not a problem.
So I'll just get into our first question here now. So
Yeah.
what initially drove you to explore the intersection between play-based learning and technology? And since you've began studying this, has your perspectives changed?
Yeah, no, so thanks. So when I started working at ECU about 10 years ago, I started teaching science and technology. And so looking at technology, particularly with young children and how they were using it. And play-based learning is one of the critical pedagogies that we use within early childhood. And so for me, it was a very natural intersection between the two, because the tenets of play-based learning is what we base a lot of our teaching around, with the idea that the children are constructing their own knowledge. And that led itself really easily into the technology space with the hands-on learning, the concrete materials, and the activities towards sort of solving problems and coming up with solutions. And so it was really a natural element of the work that I was doing, just gave me that sort of more direct focus on the technology. And so in terms of since that time, there's been an additional, the extra experience with that, as I said, it's sort of grown my interest in that area. So it's been an increased focus, and particularly moving towards the more digital elements of technology now. But definitely looking at the play-based learning and how students can be, or children particularly, can be using technology to solve problems. And that now, as I said, includes much more around the digital and the coding and the computational thinking and all of those other skills that they need with that.
Awesome. So on to our second question. So what are some common misconceptions you see about technology education for children?
Yeah, and so particularly in the digital space, it's that you have to actually be using tools that are plugged in and that have some sort of battery or some sort of electronic function with it. Whereas with young children particularly, if you don't give them the real technology tools, they'll actually make them anyway. So that misconception that you have to have the most recent and the most up-to-date technology is a bit of a misconception, because children will put sticky tape onto blocks and make that into a mobile phone and those sorts of things. So they don't actually need the real technology to do it. There's also very much the perception that young children are too young to be engaging with technology. So concerns around giving them tools, giving them access to those sorts of things. And there are safety concerns, but they're definitely capable of using those sorts of things. Particularly with the digital technology, again, this perception that it's not safe for children and they should be kept away from technology, or they get too much technology at home or outside of the school or the centre, so they shouldn't be engaging with technology as part of their learning, because it's an extra. There's very much a big focus on this screen time and how much time they're spending on tech, when the time's actually not the factor, it's how they're using it. So this really big focus on screen time is actually a real misconception as well, because if they're using it to interact or be creative, the time doesn't really matter. Whereas if it's passive, just sitting and watching, then definitely you want to be monitoring that. But actually having time where they're engaging, they're problem solving, those sorts of things, the technology is really important. The idea around, there's also, on the flip side of that, there's this idea that children are digital natives. And that they've grown up with technology. There's been quite a bit of research sort of debunking that whole idea about this digital native sort of idea. But there is that sort of perception that children are using technology a lot, so therefore they don't need it when they're at centre or school, and that the other misconception is that everyone has access to it. There's a massive divide across within Australia, but I'm sure it's internationally as well, between children who have access and those that don't. And so when we're talking about limiting access in schools and services, it's detrimental to those who don't have access to the technology at home, because not everybody does have access to it. While most families will have a mobile phone, it's not necessarily accessible to the children, or they're not able to do those higher level sort of thinking things with it. So there's quite a few misconceptions amongst the general public, and that sort of feeds into parents and educators with regards to technology and children.
Yeah, so that's a lot of different misconceptions. I've never actually heard of the screen time one before. I think that's pretty interesting because usually a lot of educators see that as a major problem. So next question here, what would you say is the biggest barrier for teachers to implement play-based learning, and how could they overcome this?
Yeah, so particularly around play-based learning, there's a big misconception around, there's a lot of barriers in terms of it not being understood. So it's seen that it's sort of looked at as that the children are just playing and they're just doing whatever they want. Whereas we know that intentionally set up environments for play-based learning are set up specifically with a learning intention in mind. And so I know, particularly within the Australian context and internationally, there's much more of a focus on this formalised learning and this direct instruction of particular things. But really, for young children, that opportunity to play and engage with others and interact with environments and materials is really important. And so, because amongst the early childhood sector, there's a lot of um, disagreement around how to define play and what sorts of play should be preferenced and those sorts of things. So it's hard to give a united front to play-based learning when the sector itself can't agree on what it is and what it looks like. So it's hard to share that idea with families who are trying to get their head around it and thinking that the children need to be learning this formal stuff once they start school. But play-based learning is really important for children's social development. They can learn so many different things with it. So it is really important for that. And so for parents to get that understanding, educators need a really strong knowledge of that so that they can be advocating for that sort of thing. And so the other, in particular in terms of technology, again, the safety concerns are an issue, and lack of knowledge around how to use technology, how to embed it, how to make it part of everyday activities is difficult. So we do need to have, in terms of the other part of that question about overcoming that, it is around a lot of training and modelling and actually breaking down for parents what the children are learning while they're playing. Being able to sort of say, yep, the children were playing with blocks, but when they were doing that, they were learning technology, they were learning mathematics concepts, engineering, and actually being able to give specific examples of what they're learning is really important to break down some of those ideas.
So you've kind of gotten into it a little bit already, but what role should teachers take to support this play-based learning? What strategies should they use to encourage the exploration of technology within the learning environment?
Yep. So they actually need to take on that facilitator role. So they're providing the resources, but more importantly, the time to get a lot out of technology, even in terms of the technology process of planning, experimenting, the trial and error, those sorts of things. It takes a lot of time, and children need to have that time to be able to try things out, see if it works, see if it doesn't, and retry it. And so the educator has a really important role in actually giving that time and the resources to do it. They're actually scaffolding the work of the children during that. So learning alongside the children, and this is another barrier, is that lack of knowledge around particular things, particularly in early learning services where you have a range of different qualifications. There can be this resistance because the educators themselves don't have a strong understanding, but they can learn alongside the children and join in when the children are inviting them into those experiences and prompt and scaffold and ask questions that get them thinking in a higher level. Um, and the resources in not only providing resources but having them open ended. So it doesn't have this sort of really clear outcome. You're not focusing on the product at the end, but giving them opportunities to explore processes and try out different things. Um, and for that range, for as I said, that trial and error, and also providing them with different contexts to think about, because they're constructing learning. The more exposure they can have to different contexts of things, learning a concept but then trying it out in different situations is really important, so that they can consolidate that learning and question it in different ways. So those sorts of strategies are really important for integrating technology, but also providing that learning and those opportunities to construct that understanding.
So just getting to our next question here, and it kind of relates back to what you discussed about barriers. So you talked about safety concerns. So what advice would you give educators who are hesitant about implementing certain tools and materials due to safety concerns?
Yeah, a lot of it is trusting the children. It's amazing. We often underestimate what they can do. And so if you actually model the safety issues and talk to them about the safety and provide clear guidelines around how to think about things and how you want to try and make sure that everyone's safe in the experience, the children actually are good at gauging that. It's important that they have that little element of risk, because that allows them to actually understand risk and know where their limits are. But they are good at it, like even for like climbing and things like that. Children know how high they can go, and they don't generally go higher than that. And so it's the same with providing them with tools and other materials. They know what they can do, and they will stop if they don't feel confident with it. So providing them the opportunities is really important. But it's also um, start with how you want them to be doing it. So start with giving those guidelines, start talking to them about safety from the beginning. And you might want to start small with sort of hand tools or sort of even plastic tools and things like that before you build up to sort of more dangerous sort of tools in terms of power tools and other sorts of things. But they can start with sort of there's a lot of sort of, particularly for young children, there's a lot of plastic resources available with cardboard that you can sort of use plastic screws and screwdrivers, and then they can progress up to tinkering. And they love pulling things apart, so give them redundant machines that they can just get there with a screwdriver and pull it all apart. That's the best fun about figuring out how things work. And obviously you need to be supervising what they're doing, but you can set those rules and give them that autonomy. And there's always, the children will look out for each other. They'll sort of keep an eye on other children as well, and they're very quick to let you know if something's happening that's not safe. So you set up those guidelines and then allow them to have that opportunity, and trust them that they will get to understand what's safe and what's not.
Yeah. So how do play-based approaches in technology education impact student engagement compared to traditional teaching methods?
Yeah. So for me, it increases engagement, particularly if you're focusing on real world problems that the children are interested in. And so we've done work with children where they've actually shown an interest in a particular area. So, for instance, we did some things around, there was a shell that a child had found, and so we ended up doing this whole inquiry into that. But there was technology elements within that. But if they're problem solving and they're hands on, they're busy, their brains are busy, they're constructing that learning. There's less behaviour guidance issues because they're busy and they're interested. It's a real world situation. They feel like they can be making a difference and having a bit of autonomy around where they want the inquiries and the technology projects to go. So that's why that open-ended materials I mentioned before is important, to allow them to take the inquiry or to take the technology project where they want it to go. Yeah, so that's really important. As I say, I've just seen children who struggle with really structured learning approaches just excel when they're given opportunity to explore what they want to do. A kindergarten that I'm involved with that does education for 3-year-olds right through to 8-year-olds at the moment. All of their learning is based on children's interest, and they follow through the projects that they want to do. And when you actually can look at that on our Australian achievement standards with our curriculum, they are actually exceeding in the majority of areas, because you're not underestimating them. them. You're not limiting their learning. They're actually allowed to excel and take it where they want to go. And the amount that they take on when they're interested is amazing.
So, just on to our next question here. Uh, how do you see technology integrated to cross-curricular areas? So areas like English, science, and math. And
Yeah.
do you have any examples from your own experience that could provide our audience?
Yeah. So I think, again, play-based learning isn't siloed. So when children are playing, they're not learning particular areas. It's perfect for that integration of different learning areas. Children aren't thinking in maths or science or art. They're thinking, um, they're just engaged in the experience and having fun and doing that. And so it's a natural part of play-based learning. So particularly for example, English, we've done things where children are able to sort of take photos of their environment. We often have done it with sort of Lego minifigures and characters where they've taken them into the garden and sort of made a story of the children, of the little Lego figure having this adventure. So they've learnt those narrative storytelling capabilities through taking photos of the minifigure in different spaces and then writing a story in an app around that's a story creator or those sorts of things where they're integrating the pictures that they've taken, they're writing the story to go with it. With technology as well, they can often dictate the story. It doesn't rely on them to be able to type. And so they can do that narrative, learn about the structure of stories, learn about characters, all of that structure of the English story writing with the use of the digital technology. Um, Science, we use technology all the time. You use it for background searching of information, so just the passive stuff of sort of searching for background stuff for the experiments that you want to do. We've done data collection through technology, so taking photos or particularly around the physics. If you're doing like a rolling activity, they can be doing slow motion videos where they're actually collecting the data through using the technology. And this is like young children, 4-year-olds, 5-year-olds that are able to do this. Um, yeah, so they're able to take the photos to collect their data. There's quite a lot of apps around for different art projects as well, so they could be experimenting with different art projects, taking photos again, and then using those, like um, editing the images to bring in different contrasts and colors and different things like that. So there are again opportunities, and with the actual, not necessarily the digital technologies, but even when you're doing science, all of the materials that you're using are technology based. So magnifying glasses, um, little pipettes, all of those sorts of things are utilizing and integrating technology into the experiments that they're doing. And as I say, we've seen lots of being able to do that with young children. That again, you don't want to limit them to think about what they're going to gain from the experience. You give them the materials and the opportunity, and they'll take it much further than you think they can.
Awesome. So, on to the last of our questions. How do you see play-based learning and technology education evolving as digital tools continue to advance? For example, here we've already moved on to using Chromebooks in our schools, so most students are
Mm-hmm.
given a Chromebook, kind of taking away that barrier. So, how do you see
Yeah.
things advancing into the future?
Yeah, technology, I mean, when you think about that, we're up to what, version 16 of the iPhone. So we've only had iPhones for 16 years, and iPads are sort of 12 or 13 years. So the amount that we've done in that time, you just think what's going to happen now? It's growing exponentially. What is going to be around in 5 years is just, we don't even know. And so the opportunities will continue to increase and at a much more rapid rate. And so the tech is becoming more ubiquitous with learning. We know, well, COVID and the lockdowns meant that we were using technology a lot more. So some of those capabilities we've learnt. Um, AI is going to be a big thing. We're not exactly sure what's going to happen with AI and where it's going to go, but it will be massive in terms of education. We're seeing that at a higher education level in terms of what's happening with AI and how you can. It's making us rethink how we're learning, and I think that's going to happen through all levels of schooling. Um, and I think there'll be an increase, an ongoing. there's many more technology like robotic toys and sort of integration of technology in different robots and all of those sorts of things. But even with all of these advancements, I think the important thing to think about is still how and why you're using it. It's not just about giving children access to the newest tech and the newest games, the newest toys. You still have to think about what are they learning through this? Why are we getting them to engage with it? And even though technology is there, I think you still need to think about, is the technology the best way to do it? I love reading books to children. So for me, I think when you see a teacher that puts a book electronically onto a whiteboard or a smart screen, I don't understand how the children are getting more from watching it on a screen as opposed to being read to by the educator or the teacher, because there's not that opportunity for interaction. So while ever the technology is going to be there, it's going to grow exponentially. It's going to continue to challenge educators because trying to keep up with that on top of everything else is really hard. But it is about making sure that you're still thinking about the learning and what the purpose of it is. So those learning intentions and that sort of stuff's going to continue to be really important.
Thanks for that. So we've got a couple questions from our audience here now, from our live stream.
Sure.
So it would seem that the implementation of technology in early childhood education is something that many countries around the world have begun to introduce. How does the European approach differ from that of your home country of Australia? And in how they not only introduce technology but avoid any negative side effects?
Yeah, so from the Centre of Excellence for the Digital Child that was mentioned in my bio, we're looking at technology integration for children from birth to 8 years of age. And so we do have some international partners from the UK and Europe involved in that project. So I know there's similar sorts of initiatives happening across the world internationally around the use of technology. So it is around integrating and using maker spaces and those sorts of things, and sort of the construction and building and thinking about how technology becomes part of the learning rather than just one element of it. And safety is the biggest concern, which it is for all children. In Australia recently, we've just introduced, or the government's just talking about introducing stricter age limits for children to be able to access social media. And so that's sort of coming in with Instagram and some of the social media sites have had to put in extra safeguards around children under 16 or under 13 not being able to access those things. So safety is an ongoing concern, and it is internationally as well. And there's a lot of controversy around whether banning children from it is the best way to go, because it's actually the critical thing is about children learning digital literacy and understanding for themselves what the safety concerns are, rather than just saying, no, you can't access it, so that they're then, because particularly around 16, we know that adolescents aren't really good at understanding risks. They don't think about risk as much as they do at other times of their development. And so leaving it till adolescence to then go, right, now you can have access to all of these tools, if they haven't learnt the skills in being able to identify how to be safe before that, it can be problematic. And so for education, it is going to be important to continue. And we've done this, part of some people that I've worked with have done things around young children understanding networks, and how once you put something out there, who has access to it, who gets permission to use it. And you can do that with sort of hands-on materials for young children. Like they've had it with a string and sharing a paper clip along the string. Once it's shared, you can't get it back, or if you've shared it and you don't have permission. So starting to develop those understandings really early, so children are developing those digital literacy skills. And I think that's something that is international, in particularly, as you say, the developed countries that are integrating technology. The safety concerns are critical within that.
Awesome. So that's the end of our live stream. So thank you to the audience for listening, and thank you to Dr. Pauline Roberts for having this interview with us and answering our questions.
Not a problem. Thanks for the
Thank you.
invitation.
Thanks.